the best thing about what we do here is it's one thing to have a relationship with your agent, but the most important relationship you have in your life is with your financial person. And for the most part, that person is the guy that you talk to like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
And with this group, it's the exact opposite. You try and create that agency type mentality, and you get to know your clients really well. You help them with more than just your financials. You help them with homes, cars, making sure they're not getting taken advantage of in taxes, and setting up for your future. I mean, that's the game of life, and that should be your most important person. So, that's what I like about this group. Obviously, the success and the numbers and everything else is separate. But when you're going through that, it's nice to have somebody that can be an unbiased opinion.
Well, good morning, guys. Super excited to be a part of this doc series with Dale Lamb and our guest today, Cody Franson. Lambo, thanks for having us this morning.
You betcha. I guess this is the inaugural event there, Franny. Thanks for coming out. Great friend, great supporter, and great client. And like you said, it's just always an honor to be able to be out here and spend some time with good quality friends. And Franny, thanks again.
Thanks for having me. This is the best located interview I've ever had.
I was thinking about that this morning, Franny. I was like, God, you've been interviewed probably by some big names in the media world, and here I am going to chat with you this morning with Lambo, and I thought, but the setting might take the cake here this morning. So
yeah,
I think we got the smelly locker room beat on that occasion. But thanks for doing this for us, Franny. So, one of the keys for us with DKL Financial and in particular the hockey group is, we really think telling the story of who we are and what we do is so important for guys to understand. Obviously there's so many choices when it comes to the business side of a player's life, whether it's the agent or the financial advisor. And for us, we thought if we could tell some stories and help guys understand why they like working with Dale and the team at DKL and Asante Wealth Management, it's going to do good things for us in the ability to tell that story. So, Franny, I appreciate you doing this. And, you guys have a bit of a similar background. Lambo, you grew up here in the Okanagan, and Franny, you grew up not too far away in Sicamous in the North Okanagan. What was it like growing up there?
It was great. I mean, Sicamous is a small spot. I was fortunate in the fact that my dad worked at the rink growing up, so obviously, myself and all my buddies and the Weber family and all those guys, we had good access to the rink and were able to log some extra hours. I mean, my dad pulled me out of school at lunchtime numerous times. Mom wasn't always happy about it, but he'd take me into the rink because nobody was ever using it around noon, and get to go shoot pucks and do whatever else he wanted to work on with me. And it's a lot of great memories. It's something that you really only get the perks like that in a small town. So yeah, I love growing up there.
I'm sure you've been asked this maybe a million times, but how on earth does Shea Weber and Cody Franson come out of Sicamous to reach the heights you guys have reached in the NHL?
Well, Shea's on a different level than me, but I think a lot of it comes back to the fact that we were just, we were multi-sport people. We played baseball, played soccer, played all those other sports growing up, and I think that goes a long way for kids. I've got two boys myself now, and I think it's important for them to play other sports and develop those other athletic qualities. But like I said, we were also lucky in the sense that we had access to the rink pretty much whenever we wanted to. Minor hockey, we practiced 4 or 5 days a week, played games. Like, the academies systems that kids are getting now is kind of what we had
by default.
By default, yeah, exactly, growing up. So, I think we were just fortunate in the sense that we had that much availability to ice, and obviously, Shea's dad's a very smart person, and my dad played and had a lot of wisdom to pass down, and you know, very fortunate, really.
When you leave Sicamous, you make the jump to the Western League. You had a tremendous junior career with the Giants. You know, a member of the Memorial Cup champions. You played for Team Canada, the World Juniors. Talk about that junior career and you know, really obviously culminating that Memorial Cup. What was that group like?
It was awesome. You know, that was really my first taste of what it was like to be a part of something that you really had to earn.
Right.
You know, I played junior B when I was 16, and we had success there, so I got a little taste of it. But you know, my first year, you know, we had Don Hay for our coach my 3 years there, and he really teaches you the value of hard work and being a well-rounded player as opposed to somebody that's kind of more one-dimensional. And you know, my first year was a learning curve for sure. You know, had to figure some things out quick. But my second year, the coaching staff there had spent a lot of time with me and kind of crafting the way I shoot the puck and different things like that. And you know, it is one of those things where we started having success that year. All of a sudden, we started to become a team that was, you know, not an easy win on team schedules. And you go through that season, you start having more success, start building something awesome, and ended up making it to the finals that year. And in the Mem Cup, we never won, but that experience and who we had to beat and what it took to win, and you know, you're sitting there in Moose Jaw with ice bags on, you know, at 18 years old, and really starting to understand what it takes to be successful in hockey was an awesome experience. Obviously, the Giants are a great organization, and they did everything for us awesome. And then able to host the next year and have a team like we had, you know, very fortunate. So
it's funny you talk about hosting it. It wasn't that long ago, Lambo, I sent you that pretty famous clip called "The Shift" for Milan Lucic, where, you know, really the start of that game against Medicine Hat, I mean, he was a man on fire. Like, obviously, Lambo, you know Luch well. Franny, what was it like having him as a teammate in junior?
Awesome. Like, from everything you've seen with him in the NHL, it was even more so in junior. You know, he came in, he was playing junior A at the start, and then he came into us, and it was hilarious. Like, just the things that, you know, to see how excited he would get to go out and to do what he does. It was just, it's a whole other type of personality, and he's one of the best humans I've ever met. You know, I love Luch to death. He's an ultimate teammate. You know, I think guys that play with him will say that about him. He's I've never heard somebody that's played with him say a bad thing about him. You know, and what he did in that shift was awesome, but what he means to a group, you know, with the type of personality he brings and what he does for a team, it's unreal.
So obviously you have unparalleled success in junior by the time you guys win it at home. I mean, what an incredible feeling that must have been. But now you're a third round pick in Nashville, and you're getting ready to make the jump to pro. But it took a little while. You didn't go straight from Memorial Cup champion to the NHL. You had to spend a couple of years in the American League. What was that experience like for you, Franny?
I think it was very important. You know, Nashville was in very much the mindset that everybody that came through their system at that point was going to spend some time in the minors. You know, Webb's never spent much, but he was down there for, you know, a little bit just to see what it was like. I think he maybe played a handful of games, but you know, they drafted so well for that stretch of time there that there really was no place to go but to the minors. You know, I mean, when I played 2 years down there, had 2 successful seasons in Milwaukee, and when I did finally crack it, my D partner in the 5-6 hole was Dan Hamhuis. I mean, you know, they were just so strong. So, you know, lucky to have 2 good seasons down in Milwaukee, and you know, I had to stay in Nashville and train for the summer before I finally stuck and do all the extra stuff and understand the grind of the AHL and what it really takes to make it up top. And a lot of valuable lessons came out of that I'm very thankful for.
So talk about that experience, maybe that transition from the AHL now to the NHL, and maybe let's look at it from a business lens a little bit, Franny. Now you're getting paid, you're away from home, you're on your own, you know, you're going from Milwaukee to Nashville, and you know, I've always sort of had the impression, and maybe talk about this, that, you know, as a young guy going into a locker room with some established guys who have been paid, you know, is it tough to not get caught up in the money a little bit, where you want to keep up with the Joneses, as that expression goes?
Oh, it definitely can. And you know what? For the most part, it's not even your fault. You know, it's like, you know, in the minors, you're making you know, when I was going through, the most an entry-level contract could make was 62.5. You know, and then you get your signing bonus. In my year, the signing bonus numbers dropped, so 240 was the most you could make. So you get this signing bonus at 240. You think you're like coming out of junior, like, man, I'm set. You know, it's like, and then that first check comes in that's
minus
supposed
the tax.
yeah, minus tax. It cuts it more than half. It's like,
Whoa.
you know, like, you know, one of the first things I did with my money was buy a house in Sicamous for my family to, you know, set up shop.
Yeah.
You know, we moved around quite a bit in Sicamous and whatnot. So we bought a house in Sicamous and still own it today. And you know, it worked out great. But it's like you expect to have this amount of money, and then once you understand what the tax game's like, it's you know, you kind of got to recalculate and go from there. And then obviously living on a salary of 62.5 in the minors, you understand the importance of budgeting and you know what you should be trying to bring home at the end of each month and all that kind of stuff to plan for summer, because if you really want to make it, you can't have a summer job, so you got a budget to have X amount of money for the summer and be able to train and not have to think about anything else. And then obviously once you make the jump, it's, you know, that if you're going to be successful, your only focus can be hockey.
Right.
You know, it's like they say, it's hard to make it, it's harder to stay. And once you get up there, you start making the bigger money and stuff, and it's great. But you also understand the fact that, you know, when you go for lunch with guys in the minors, you're going to Joe Schmo's place and your lunch is $12-15. Now all of a sudden you're going for dinner with guys in the show, and it's like you're getting a $90 steak and they're drinking wine and you've never had wine. So it's like you got to start learning to drink wine because you're paying for it. So you know, it's like,
I love that.
Yeah.
One.
So it's like you know, you gotta. It's just kind of what you're introduced to, and your expenses go up, and obviously the money goes up, but it's a whole other type of budgeting.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit, because this part fascinates me a bit, because one of the things I always get really passionate about and really enamored with about the job we do for our guys at DKL really is centered around planning and making sure they understand the budget and stuff like that. Like, Franny, would you say that most guys get some education in that, or are they just handed a paycheck and they got to try and sink or swim on their own?
I would say for the most part, guys tackle it kind of like they would an agent, because it's like you kind of go with, like, you know, you got a buddy that played and who he had and did he like him, and if he liked him, it's you kind of trust him through that guy. You know, I would say the financial guy, it's even more so, because you know, there's no Sidney Crosbys in the financial world. There's lots of guys that are good. There's some guys you got to be careful for. It's not like an automatic where this is the best guy, you know. So it's a little more difficult. It's a lot of you take a lot of accountability from guys that you know have worked with certain people, and you kind of just go out on a limb and think that person's going to be good, you know. And if you're lucky, it works out great. But you know, it's definitely a little bit of a sink or swim mentality. I mean, some guys are more educated than others, depending on how they did in school and what they
guys,
took.
Eh?
Yeah. Well, college guys are good, but I mean, I took some accounting and stuff and whatnot, so I do a little bit about financials. But for the most part, I'd say guys are pretty much just trying to feel it out on their own. I mean, nobody's really coming into there unless you did full graduation from one of the colleges that have a real good grasp on the financial aspect of things.
So let's talk about your NHL career for a minute, because I think there's an important story in here, Franny, when you talk about, again, meshing the business of sport. You know, you had established yourself as a Toronto Maple Leaf, and you know, you were approaching free agency, and you had an opportunity to re-sign with the club, and ultimately, you know, decided to maybe test free agency, and it didn't work out, obviously, like you had hoped. You know, talk about that story a little bit, and maybe some of the thought process that goes behind that sort of process for a player as they maybe approach free agency, and you know, sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side, maybe.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I've seen every scenario. You know, I've been a holdout, and I hate saying that about myself, because it's not the type of person I am. It's just what, from a business standpoint, we felt was the best course of action. Unfortunately, it just kind of happened to constantly be the same thing. I mean, the longest contract I ever got was 2 years. You know, I've been a holdout. I've been to arbitration. I've elected to not have arbitration rights. Like, I've literally been in every situation possible, and none of it's ever fun. You know, I've been the guy going into free agency that's supposed to be one of the top defensemen going, and then all of a sudden everybody around you goes. you know, your kind of bottom falls out from under you. You end up waiting until September. I've had that happen to me twice.
Yeah.
You know, so you know that it's a tough situation, and like you asked about the situation in Toronto. I mean, that's the one regret I really have in my career is not trying to explore that more. You know, decisions were made. I mean, I can't fault my agency completely, because at the end of the day, I agree to those decisions that we make as a group, and I just wish I would have been able to step out, see what I see now, and spend more time in trying to make that situation in Toronto work. You know, and it's hard. You know, with your agency, they have your market value comps and everything else, and you kind of get stuck in this bubble of this is what I should come in at for this long, and you know, my comps say this, and you really just bank on the fact that your comps are right, and you hope that the GMs around the league see it the same. You know, in my case, that was never really the outcome. And you know, for my dad, you know, when we got that offer in Toronto, it was hard for him. You know, he's like, buddy, this is a lot of money. Like, we never thought we'd get you to this point, and you know, you should really think about this. But it's hard for people you love. It's hard for the people that, you know, are representing you in that circumstance to really come out and be like, maybe this is something that we should pump the brakes on, take a minute, look into it a little farther. You know, that is something you can't ask of your loved ones or your friends, because, you know, my dad tried to say it to me. You know, I had friends say like, yeah, that's a nice chunk of change, you know, maybe you should think about that. But it's like, you know, they say it kind of jokingly, or it always ends up being some type of laughing matter. But nowadays it is the only regret I have in my career. And I mean, the offer I got from Toronto was a 3-year contract, and it wasn't a bad offer, but with what my comps were and where my agency felt we were coming in, it was something that was just too far away. You know, it felt it wasn't really worth trying to negotiate, because it was just too far away from what we thought, and ended up getting traded, and it didn't go well in Nashville just because of what they had, and it just wasn't a good fit, you know. And then obviously you go into free agency and you bank on the body of work that you've put down still being there, and when it didn't go well, it didn't really account for much.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes, no matter, you know, you as a player didn't change when you went back to Nashville, but the situation had changed, and it just wasn't a great fit. And unfortunately, in the hockey world, a lot of decisions are based on money when they really should be based on fit, because it's going to determine your ultimate success.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was trying to say is, like, you know, your agent's in the game with you. He's as close to it as you are, and it's hard to really step out and see what's really going on sometimes from that point. And then your family and your friends, it's like, well, they aren't really in it with you, so it's hard for their opinion to really hold a lot of weight. And that's where I think it's really important to have your financial team have a voice in really understanding what this can do for your financial plans for post hockey, through hockey, whatever else you want to do in your life. It's understanding the importance of what your current situation can provide.
I think, Franny, maybe just step in there. I guess you and I really became close kind of around that time when that happened. And I wasn't really part of that, but I can tell you, if I was today, if we go back then, I think we would have had that deal in Toronto and just said, you know what, we would have been able to quantify numbers and really I would have been able to ask you those key questions that I think the answers would have led us to believe, to say, you know what, that's a lot of dough, and at that, it puts that security. And you're right, I think the big thing for players today is, you know, rarely are you seeing big fat deals anymore, and I think, you know, there's going to be less and less of them. I was away last week at Predator Ridge with, you know, an owner of a NHL team. I was there with one of the best GMs in hockey over the years, and just listening to kind of the dialogue and the talking. The game's changing, you know, the contracts are changing, you know, the expectations are going to change, and I don't think, you know, again, you're going to see a lot of whopping contracts, maybe for the top 5-10 guys, but for the majority of them, you know, that's it. So I think you're right, understanding that you make a ton of money in a short period of time, and if the offer's there, you really need to be able to quantify that with your team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all about the team you have around you, just like the sport. And, you know, like you said, we kind of started working together just after that. And, you know, obviously the relationship that I had with my financial guy at that time was standard to most everybody else. You know, you speak to him a couple times a year. You know, it's no fault, but that's just what's standard in the industry for the most part.
They don't get involved at the same level, would you say, Cody, that I do? I mean, you and I talk weekly, if not every other day some days, and it's, I'm the same way with all our guys. You know, I was there the other day on a call with one of our guys from the Jets, and you know, he phoned me, you know, the other night, it was last night actually, and I was sitting on the dock at 7 o'clock, wasn't it, David? You were there, and he calls me, you know, he's closing on a deal, and he was asking me on the price that he was going to pay for a notary.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what do you think? And he says, well, they're going to charge me this in Alberta, and they're going to charge me this in BC. I said, take it. I said, it's good. He says, you sure? I know it is, because I know what rates are for legal teams for providing conveyancing. So it made him feel good. But it just being there to answer that phone at 7 o'clock, I don't remember the last time I called my banker or anybody else for that matter, and they're picking up the phone at 7 o'clock
to
answer a question like that. And that's what we do, I would say.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, you know, looking back, if we had this relationship when I was going through that, the type of relationship we have is one that probably would have made us pump the brakes and say, let's maybe try and figure this out. We're really not that far off of what could set me up for life. You know, so I mean, if a guy has that type of relationship with his financial person, that's amazing. But I don't think it's out there a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's one of the things we really try to add that extra value around. You know, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, you know, guys get so focused on rates of return. You always hear that, you know, my guy can do this and do that, and you know, we sort of chuckle about it because we do that and everything else that goes with it. So talk about that locker room dynamic. You know, is every guy in the room he's got the hot tip, or you know, you got to invest in this, and crypto is you got to do this, and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the Bitcoin's a big one right now, but
we've seen what's happened there.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of stems back to is it more a sink or swim situation for guys when it comes to, you know, the financial side. Most guys don't have a great financial background to know exactly what they're talking about. So when you go into that type of situation, it's, you know, rate of return really is just kind of the benchmark. I mean, for the general hockey mind, it's really what we're trying. It's like goals and assists for the player. It's like that's kind of where your, you know, importance or your, you know, kind of rating comes in. So for hockey players, I think, you know, when they want to know what your rate of returns are, that's kind of just them trying to measure you out, because in simple form, that's really all they know or care to know or whatever. But, you know, once you start to understand things more, you start understanding the importance of tax efficiency, you know, financial planning, learning to budget, learning, you know, what type of purchases can set you up well, what type of purchases can actually set you back, all these other type of things. So
one of the things maybe to comment that I always see as important is, you know, you were in the accumulation phase of your life, as is I am, as is we all are here. And, you know, I think the thing is, in the hockey world, they're in the accumulation phase for a short period of time.
100%.
And then, for the majority of them, they go into what I call the deaccumulation phase, and fast, where most people will hit that at 60, 55. A lot of these players are hitting it at 30 and don't realize that they've got capital extrapolation that has to run for 40, 50 years. And when you actually break it down, the amount of money that you need to have, it's a significant amount. Especially if you take them actually to what their burn rate is when you quantify it with after-tax dollars. It's not before tax. This is what people don't understand, and Cody and I have spent a ton of time on the tax side, like understanding tax. Look where we live in Canada. You know, if it's not the 50% marginal, both provincial and federal, then you got your GST, then you got your PST, then you got your property taxes, then you got your, you know, it goes on and on and on.
One of the things I always love, Lambo, that you say, you know, you almost feel like it is your duty and responsibility to help these guys not make bad decisions.
Always, I've said that. And it is, and I always said, and you've seen it, that, you know what, if you don't ask, I can't help. And I've been pretty hard on a couple of guys, you know, because again, to me, Cody, Schultze, Luch, doesn't matter who they are. They're all friends. They're just people. You guys are all people. You're just part of who we work with. And ultimately, that's a big reason what I always say is that I don't care that personality, money has no emotion, doesn't care who manages or doesn't manage, care where it is. The fact of the matter is, you just treat it like a business. And that's how we run at DKL Financial Group. It's a business. You have to look at the whole spectrum and the whole sphere and the whole layout of what you have and where you're at, and then what's our best way to navigate through all those situations.
So let me ask you now, you're a little older than you were.
Just a little.
A little bit. You find yourself back in the American League right now. You had a great season. What's the motivation at this point? Is it to prove maybe you deserve another kick at the can, or is it about just continuing to do what you really all you've known to do since you were a young guy? Or where do you think you're at mentally with that, Franny?
Well, I mean, you know, for the longest time, I had that. I mean, when I got sent down my last year in Chicago, I had that mentality. And, you know, I did pretty much everything I possibly could. I put up big numbers. We went on a playoff run, turned everything around, and nothing came out of it. You know, nobody traded for me. Nobody tried to put me on a team that was looking to make a run as even a depth person at that point. Like, you know, that whole side of my career came to an end a lot faster than I anticipated it to. You know, I was playing with Duncan Keith on the first pairing, playing 24 minutes a night. I got injured, broke a couple ribs, came back 2 weeks later, played a game, and got sent down, and that was it. Career's over. I mean, I definitely had that mentality at the start. When I went to the KHL for those couple years, I was definitely trying to prove something, and you know, I wanted to test myself on the big ice. I wanted to show my knock in people's eyes has always been the way I move. I wanted to be like, okay, well, I'm going to go play on the biggest ice surfaces for 2 years, be successful, and show everybody that I can still move, be efficient, play against skilled small guys, because you know that's what the majority of the league is kind of going to, skilled and speed and all these things that, you know, everything else. But you know, we really enjoyed the 2 years over there in Moscow and playing for Omsk. And then when I came back, I kind of just started to accept the fact that the days in the sun might be, you know, too far away to really grab onto again. And, you know, as a leadership role that I've always taken on with the teams that I've played for and been considered a leader, it's always kind of been mentoring the younger guys that come in a little bit, taking them under your wing and making them comfortable, making them understand things, teaching them how, you know, the game's supposed to be played and how to win, how to lose, like all the important things that you need to understand and develop to be a pro. I've really enjoyed that side of the leadership game, and that's kind of the role I got put into with Chicago when I was there the last time. So went back and did that, had a lot of fun, still played well and feeling healthy and all that kind of stuff. So I'll keep going until then, and until the day comes where it's not worth my time anymore, and that'll be the end of it.
So let me ask you, what would Franny the veteran tell Franny the rookie breaking in right now? What have you learned that maybe you wish you would have known back in the day?
Well, enjoy it first and foremost. I mean, when you step in, the older guys around you always say that it goes by fast. Enjoy it, don't take it for granted, and it couldn't be more true. Yeah. You know, especially with the way the game's going now, the age at which guys are starting to get booted from the league is getting younger and younger and younger. When I came in, 27 was the start of your prime. Right. You know, 32, 33 was still considered like the back end of your prime, and guys were playing into their mid and later 30s. Yeah. Now, you get to free agency, it's like, well, we don't really want to give you a long deal because you're old at 27. You know, so it's like, unless you're a stud, getting 3 years at 27 years old is going to be considered a pretty sizable deal in terms of term. You know, you look at guys that are hanging on right now at that age range of older guys is starting to creep closer and closer to 30 years old, and it goes by fast. Some guys are fortunate enough to break in right from the draft now because of the way the salary cap's working, and teams want to go young and quick as opposed to experienced and older. I think you see that balancing around a little more with the teams that are having success. You know, every team that has success has some guys that are younger and coming in and playing more predominant roles, but the guys that they want to play as role players, they're getting some older guys back because they understand the value in that. But for the most part, I'd say that's the biggest one is enjoy it, and it goes by fast.
Last question for you. When you look back at your career, do you attribute your success to hard work and grinding it out, or do you attribute your ability to make it in the game just by natural skill?
Oh, it's definitely the hard work side for me. I mean, for me, the biggest thing was just having that attitude of proving people wrong. Like, since I was a kid, people said I'm not a good enough skater, yada, yada, yada. They compare me to, you know, kids my age that are defensemen that are going in the Bantam draft and the NHL draft. And you always have these knocks, and just kind of having that chip on your shoulder that, you know, you. You know,
Yeah.
I know I can do this, and I know what I can bring to the table, and then the feeling of being able to shove that in some people's faces is always what kind of carried me. You know, people thought I'd always be a minor league defenseman, or people thought I'd be a 5'6" at best, and then you get the chance to go up and play on the top line. You show you can hang, you show you can be successful. Just having that kind of mentality is I think what enabled me to have success.
Well, Franny, thanks for doing this. You're a hell of a guy. We love having you a part of the team at DKL. You're a great advocate for what Dale and the group does, and we appreciate it. And thanks for coming and spending a morning with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
And this is my world now.